The untold story behind Molly Qerim's ESPN exit, a full transcript. Part 1, the shocking departure. It's me or them. Molly Qerim's exit from ESPN shocked fans everywhere. But now, she's finally opening up. And in a stunning twist, she's accusing Stephen A. Smith of being behind it all. You can't just wake up and be Stephen A. It takes work. In the end, we all have people to answer to. Stephen A. has called out countless people over the years, but this time, could the spotlight be turning back on him? Let's dig in. This is the shocking exit that nobody saw coming. Molly Qerim, a prominent sports broadcaster, had been a key figure at ESPN since 2006. She initially worked on digital and mobile platforms before transitioning to on-air roles. She became the permanent host of the morning debate show First Take in 2015, partnering with Stephen A. Smith and contributing to its growth into one of ESPN's flagship programs, which achieved its most watched year in 2023. But here's where the story gets really interesting, and this is something that most people completely missed. The announcement of Qerim's exit came via an Instagram story, where she expressed gratitude for her time at ESPN. She highlighted the honor of hosting First Take and working with talented colleagues, while thanking fans for their support. She described the experience as a dream come true and teased future endeavors would stay tuned, but provided no specific reason for leaving or any accusations. Now, this is where things get absolutely wild. On Monday, September 15th, Molly showed up to work, did her job on First Take like she had done for the past 10 years, and left the studio without any fanfare or ceremony. Nobody, and I mean nobody, suspected that this would be her final show. But then, the very next morning, everything exploded. This low-key reveal contrasted with the abrupt nature of her resignation, which was effective immediately. It accelerated a planned departure originally set for the end of the year, due to a leak from Sports Business Journal. Think about that for a moment. We're talking about a departure that was supposed to happen months later, but suddenly became immediate overnight. What could possibly cause such a dramatic acceleration? The truth is, this wasn't just a simple resignation. This was a calculated move that caught ESPN completely off guard, and the evidence of this is scattered throughout the aftermath of her announcement. ESPN confirmed that contract negotiations have been ongoing, with the network offering her a new deal, but Qerim opted to move on to explore other opportunities. But here's what makes this story even more compelling. The way Stephen A. Smith found out about this departure reveals just how sudden and unexpected it really was. And this is where we start to see cracks in what appear to be a professional, amicable separation. On his show, Smith said, "Last night, she abruptly resigned as the host of the show. And to say that, I'm quite sad about it is an understatement. Molly is a friend. Molly is a co-worker. Molly is somebody that I've leaned on many occasions in the past, as she has done when it comes to me." Smith's reaction tells us everything we need to know about how blindsided everyone was by this decision. This wasn't a planned, coordinated departure announcement. This was damage control in real time, and you could hear it in his voice during that broadcast. The timing of everything becomes even more suspicious when you consider the corporate response. ESPN's president of content, Burke Magnus, publicly thanked Qerim for her contributions, praising her poise, skill, professionalism, and role in driving First Take success. He emphasized that the network wanted her to stay, even discussing roles beyond the show, but negotiations did not fully align with her desires. Now, here's where the story takes another fascinating turn. Magnus described the situation as a straightforward business decision without controversy, noting ESPN's plan for a 30 to 45-day tryout period to test potential replacements, including in-house talent. But if this was such a straightforward business decision, why did it happen so abruptly? Why was there a need for immediate damage control? And most importantly, why did Stephen A. Smith seem so genuinely surprised and emotional about the departure? The answer lies in understanding the complex web of relationships, power dynamics, and business negotiations that were happening behind the scenes at ESPN. What we witnessed wasn't just a host leaving a show. It was a culmination of months, possibly years, of growing tensions that finally reached a breaking point. And speaking of breaking points, let's talk about the most telling aspect of Molly's departure announcement. In her Instagram story, She thanked her colleagues and fans. She expressed gratitude for the opportunity, and she teased future projects. But there's one glaring omission that speaks volumes about the real state of affairs behind the scenes. She didn't mention Stephen A. Smith by name. Not once. Now, you might think that's not a big deal, but in the world of television partnerships, especially ones that have lasted a decade, that kind of omission is absolutely deafening. When Shannon Sharpe left Undisputed, he made sure to acknowledge his partnerships and relationships. When Max Kellerman departed First Take, there were acknowledgments and professional courtesies exchanged. But Molly's statement was notably devoid of any personal recognition for her co-host of 10 years. This omission becomes even more significant when you consider the public face that Molly and Stephen A. had always presented. They were supposed to be this dynamic duo, this professional partnership that had helped elevate First Take to unprecedented heights. Qerim's career also included stints at CBS Sports and NFL Network, and she has been open about personal challenges, such as her battle with endometriosis. Her departure from ESPN, announced on September 16, 2024, marked the end of a decade-long tenure on First Take, but was framed as a voluntary decision rather than a firing. The professional chemistry between Molly and Stephen A. was undeniable on screen. But as we're about to discover, that on-screen chemistry may have been masking some serious behind-the-scenes tensions that have been building for quite some time. The plot thickens even further when you examine the immediate aftermath of the announcement. Magnus told The Athletic that the abruptness stemmed from the leak, and ESPN had been planning a tryout period for replacements. But this raises even more questions. If ESPN was already planning for her departure and had a replacement strategy in place, why were they simultaneously trying to negotiate a new contract with her? Part 2. The Hidden Power Dynamics and Stephen Yes Response. Now, we get to the heart of this story, and this is where things get really interesting, because we're about to dive deep into the power structures and behind-the-scenes dynamics that most viewers never get to see. What happened with Molly Qerim's departure from ESPN isn't just about contract negotiations or professional disagreements. It's about understanding how influence and power actually work in sports media. And Stephen A. Smith's role in all of this is far more complex than most people realize. Let's start with Stephen A.'s immediate response to Molly's departure, because his reaction tells us so much about the real dynamics at play here. On air, Smith stated, "To be blunt, it came as a shock. I was not aware that this is something that she was contemplating doing. But in the end, she made her decision, and we have to move on as a show. I don't like it. I'm not happy about it. Because I appreciate her and what she has meant to me, what she has meant to the show, what she has meant to the network, what she's meant to the business, and I'm going to miss her." But here's what's fascinating about this response. While Stephen A. is expressing sadness and surprise, he's also being very careful about how much information he reveals. He said, "Do I have an idea? Of course I do. Am I going to share it with you? No, because again, that's her story to tell." This careful dance around the details becomes even more significant when you understand the criticism that Stephen A. faced for how he handled the announcement. On the Speakeasy podcast, host Emmanuel Aiko, LaShawn McCoy, and others accused Smith of exacerbating speculation by using terms like abruptly resigned and teasing undisclosed details, which they said made it sound like something wild happened. Aiko specifically called out the inconsistency in Smith sharing partial information while claiming privacy, arguing it unnecessarily amplified drama around the split. This criticism hits at something much deeper than just poor communication skills. What Aiko and others were pointing out is that Stephen A.'s response seemed calculated to generate buzz and speculation rather than simply honoring his colleague's departure. And when you dig deeper into the power dynamics at ESPN, this calculated approach starts to make a lot more sense. Here's something that most people don't fully understand about Stephen A. Smith's role at ESPN. He's not just the star of First Take. He's also an executive producer on the show. This means he has significant influence over casting decisions, show direction, and yes, even contract negotiations for other talent on the program. Smith has already emerged as a notable voice in politics to go along with his well-established prominence in sports talk, and his nearly $20 million a year deal makes him one of the most powerful figures at the network. When you understand this level of influence, Molly's departure takes on a completely different complexion. This wasn't just about ESPN not wanting to pay her what she was worth. This was about Stephen A. Smith potentially not advocating for his co-host of 10 years when it really mattered. And this is where former ESPN analyst Marcellus Wiley's analysis becomes absolutely crucial to understanding what really happened. On his podcast, Wiley speculated about potential behind-the-scenes drama, suggesting Qerim's exit was driven by unmet demands for higher pay, around $500,000 annually compared to Smith's $20 million, and her own show, with Smith allegedly not advocating for her. Wiley stated, "Now, the last part of it is this is a twist. She wanted to do other stuff. Nope. Basically, you want to host your own show? No. Basically, you want more money? Not much. Now, who signs off on all the money there? Think about it. Think about it. The bosses. But who are the bosses? That's Stephen A. Smith as well." This analysis reveals something that most viewers never consider: the vast disparity in not just salaries, but actual power and influence within the network. While Molly was making approximately $500,000 annually, Stephen A. was pulling down $20 million, a 40-to-1 ratio that goes far beyond just reflecting their respective contributions to the show's success. But the financial disparity is just the tip of the iceberg. What's even more revealing is understanding how Stephen A.'s influence extends throughout ESPN's decision-making process. Wiley pointed to Smith's role in other colleagues' contract negotiations, noting how Smith's advocacy can make or break deals for other first-take contributors. Perkins had his deal, and when Perkins was up, remember Perkins was getting a day job rate, and he turned that into a $700,000 a year job. Wiley said, "Perkins just talked about that recently about how Stephen A. Smith has that pull. Stephen A. Smith even talked about that when he checked Cam Newton recently, talking about, hey, I've hooked a lot of guys up with money around here." This reveals a pattern that's absolutely crucial to understanding Molly's situation. Stephen A. has consistently used his influence to advocate for certain colleagues, while seemingly not extending that same advocacy to others. The question becomes, where did Molly fall in this hierarchy? And why wasn't Stephen A. willing to go to bat for her the way he had for others? The answer might lie in understanding the evolution of their professional relationship over the years. While they maintained professional demeanor on camera, there have been numerous instances of tension and disagreement that, when viewed in retrospect, suggest a relationship that wasn't as solid as it appeared to viewers. Research into previous interactions between Molly Qerim and Stephen A. Smith reveals that any perceived conflicts primarily stem from on-air debates and banter on first take rather than deep-seated personal conflicts. However, several incidents over the years paint a picture of growing friction. For instance, in December 2023, during a segment discussing a potential coaching role, the exchange escalated when Qerim challenged Smith's views, accusing him of prioritizing box office appeal and disliking small markets. Then there was a January 2024 incident where Qerim appeared frustrated during a discussion, muttering, "What the F***K," in response to Smith's commentary on her evolution from host to supermodel status. This moment went viral precisely because it seemed to capture genuine frustration rather than playful banter. But perhaps most telling was the June 2024 incident where Qerim discreetly advised Smith to close his laptop after the camera inadvertently displayed his screen, potentially exposing private messages. Smith initially hesitated but complied, with Qerim explaining the risk to prevent embarrassment. The interaction was portrayed online as Smith not listening. And while it was helpful guidance from Qerim, Smith's resistance suggested underlying tension. These incidents, when viewed individually, might seem like typical workplace dynamics. But when you string them together over a 10-year period and then factor in the power imbalances and contract negotiations, a pattern emerges of a relationship that was increasingly strained beneath the surface. Wiley noted that her farewell message omitted Smith as a deliberate sign of resentment, and her immediate departure was intentional to highlight the situation, framing it as business tensions rather than personal conflict. He emphasized that the relationship wasn't as strong as advertised. This brings us to perhaps the most damning aspect of this entire situation: the suggestion that Stephen A. Smith, with all his influence and power at ESPN, simply chose not to advocate for Molly when it mattered most. And if that's true, it raises serious questions about loyalty, professional relationships, and the often brutal realities of sports media politics. Part 3. The Aftermath and What It All Really Means. Now, let's examine what happened between Molly Qerim and Stephen A. Smith and the broader implications for sports media and how power dynamics play out in high-stakes television environments. Because what we're really looking at here isn't just a contract dispute or professional disagreement. It's a case study in how influence, loyalty, and business decisions intersect in ways that can fundamentally alter careers and relationships. Let's start with the immediate aftermath of Molly's departure and how ESPN handled the situation, because their response tells us everything about how seriously they took the potential fallout. ESPN described the situation as a straightforward business decision without controversy, but the speed with which they moved to implement damage control suggests otherwise. Here's what's particularly fascinating about ESPN's corporate response. They did something they almost never do when talent leaves the network. Usually, when someone departs ESPN, the company issues a brief, generic statement wishing them well and moves on. But in Molly's case, ESPN President of Content Burke Magnus gave detailed explanations to The Athletic about the circumstances of her departure, something that's highly unusual for the network. Magnus told the outlet, "The one thing that was unexpected was the timing of all this. Molly put out a statement because there was a report on it. So it kind of got out of our respective controls once that happened." This level of corporate explanation suggests that ESPN was genuinely concerned about the narrative surrounding Molly's departure. They weren't just losing a host. They were potentially facing a public relations crisis that could damage their flagship morning show and raise uncomfortable questions about their treatment of talent. But the most revealing aspect of the aftermath has been the speculation and analysis from industry insiders who understand the real dynamics at play. Former ESPN personality Marcellus Wiley's analysis has been particularly illuminating, as he's provided insights into how contract negotiations and power dynamics actually work behind the scenes at the network. Wiley speculated, "So when that report comes out, I guess it triggers her, or more importantly, she's like, why am I sitting in a situation that I know won't get better? Think about it. But when you know you need to do something and you know it's best for you, what you waiting for?" This analysis gets to the heart of what likely happened. Molly reached a point where she realized that her situation at ESPN wasn't going to improve, regardless of how long she waited or how hard she negotiated. And when you understand the power structures and financial disparities involved, her decision to leave immediately rather than endure months more what she likely saw as futile negotiations makes perfect sense. But here's where the story gets even more complex and revealing about the state of sports media. Wiley's analysis also highlighted the stark financial disparities within ESPN, noting that talents like Mina Kimes were earning significantly more than Molly, despite not being the co-host of the network's flagship morning show. "Think about if you're Molly," Wiley said. "You're working at a network where Mina Kimes is making way more money than you, and Mina Kimes is the number what on what show, right? You're number 2 on the number 1 show, and she is what on what shows, right? So your point is like, and you see Malika Andrews and all that. That's a different lane. That's a whole different animal, different beast." This financial landscape reveals something crucial about how ESPN values different types of talent and different roles within the network. It suggests that being the co-host of First Take, despite the show's massive success and cultural impact, wasn't valued as highly as other roles within the ESPN ecosystem, at least not when it came to Molly's compensation. The gender dynamics here are impossible to ignore, and they add another layer of complexity to this story. When you look at the compensation structures and opportunities available to different talents at ESPN, patterns emerge that raise uncomfortable questions about how female hosts and contributors are valued compared to their male counterparts. But beyond the financial and power dynamics, there's something even more fundamental at play here: the question of loyalty and professional relationships in high-stakes media environments. Stephen A. Smith's response to Molly's departure, while superficially supportive, revealed some telling details about their actual relationship. He said, The details, quite frankly, are none of y'all's business. But it's not as if I know all the details. It was a contract negotiation that was going on. ESPN certainly did not want to lose her. But in the end, rather, she made a decision to walk away from the show effective immediately. As you see from her Instagram post, her Instagram story. Notice the careful language here. Stephen A. is simultaneously expressing ignorance about the details while also revealing that he knows it was about contract negotiations. He's walking a very fine line between appearing supportive and protecting his own interests and relationships within the network. This calculated response becomes even more significant when you consider the criticism he faced from industry colleagues. Emmanuel Ako's critique on the Speakeasy podcast was particularly pointed, arguing that Stephen A. was using Molly's departure for clicks and views rather than protecting a colleague of 10 years. From a human perspective, Molly was your psychic for 10 years, Ako said. We don't need to know she abruptly resigned. Protect her at all costs. She didn't want it to leak. We don't need to know she abruptly resigned. But now, Stephen A., you're the one who told us she resigned. This criticism hits at something fundamental about professional relationships and loyalty in the media industry. Ako's point is that if Stephen A. truly cared about Molly as a colleague and friend, he would have found a way to discuss her departure that didn't generate additional speculation and drama. The implications of the story extend far beyond just one departure from one show. What we're looking at is a case study in how power dynamics, financial disparities, and personal relationships intersect in ways that can fundamentally alter careers and reshape major media properties. The ongoing speculation about Molly's next move and the potential long-term impact on First Take's success demonstrates just how significant this departure really is. ESPN isn't just replacing a host. They're trying to recreate a chemistry and dynamic that took years to develop, and that was crucial to the show's success. But perhaps the most important lesson from this entire saga is about understanding the often brutal realities of television and media careers. Success on screen doesn't necessarily translate to job security or fair compensation behind the scenes. Relationships that appear strong and supportive in public can be far more complex and even adversarial in private. For Molly Qerim, this departure represents both an ending and a beginning. Her decision to leave immediately rather than wait out her contract suggests someone who had reached a definitive conclusion about her future at ESPN. Rather than accepting a situation that she felt undervalued her contributions and limited her opportunities, she chose to bet on herself and her ability to create new opportunities elsewhere. For Stephen A. Smith, this situation reveals both the extent of his power within ESPN and the limitations of that power when it comes to maintaining relationships and team dynamics. His response to Molly's departure will likely be scrutinized for years to come as an example of how not to handle a colleague's departure, regardless of the underlying circumstances. For ESPN, this departure represents a significant challenge in maintaining the success of their flagship morning show, while also managing the broader implications for their talent relationships and public image. The way they handle Molly's replacement and the long-term success of First Take will serve as important indicators of their ability to manage high-profile departures and transitions. And for the broader sports media industry, this story serves as a reminder of how quickly relationships can deteriorate and how business decisions can have far-reaching consequences for both individual careers and major media properties. The Molly Qerim departure saga is far from over. As she lands her next opportunity and as First Take continues without her, we'll learn more about the real impact of this decision on all parties involved. But what's already clear is that this story represents something much larger than just one host leaving one show. It's a window into the complex, often difficult realities of modern sports media and the personal and professional costs of success in this industry. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.